I recently had the opportunity to review the new book Germanic Theology Volume One, Poetic Edda The Lays of the Gods by Tristan Powers. Now, when reviewing books, before reading them properly, I like to flick through and look at anything that catches my eye, and it was in doing so that I noticed that the sound was reminiscent of one of those Gideon's Bibles that you get in hotel room drawers. And this isn't some banal observation, and that's not to say that the pages are as thin as those, but it was just a feeling that I had. And in many ways this is a Bible, but one which explains and articulates a religion that is very different to the one expressed in the secreted Gideon tomes. It is a religion that, in one form, had its embryonic first flourishing in the steppes, before elements of it found their way to what seems like its most natural habitat, northwestern Europe. Now, paganism, particularly the Germanic and Norse varieties, is growing rapidly, and this feels like the perfect guide for would-be adherents to turn to. Personally, I have little interest in organised worship one way or another, but this book's usefulness and intrigue does not end with those who do. That said, I was pleased to see a dedication inside to Freya and to her brother, the, to use distinctly un-Germanic terminology, hyperphallust Yngvi Frey. The more I learn about Freya, the more I understand and appreciate the allegorical significance and purpose of this deity, even though I often find myself more drawn to the rhythmic frenzy of Odin's spear dance. I think the resurgence of paganism is due to the increased atomization of people, the Fimbulwinter-like state when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship, an hour of wolves and shattered shields when the age of men comes crashing down, as Aragorn calls it in the heavily Norse mythology-inspired The Lord of the Rings. That, and the fact that seasonally and spiritually Germanic and Celtic mythology just seems increasingly to fit, both in Northern Europe and among those who adhere to this focused revival in North America. But, as I hinted at, there is plenty to interest the mere casual reader in this comprehensive book. Whilst I think the book is some way short of being a theology, as the title suggests, it is a brilliant reference point for the Poetic Edda and the wider philosophical and spiritual framework that underpins it. And, no doubt this was Powers' intention, I found it unputdownable and would catch myself thinking deeply on many aspects and conclusions the book reaches. The book's glossary is also a very useful guide, and I found its value-led and sometimes non-neutral nature to be instructive rather than misdirecting in how to approach the contents. This book fosters a deeper understanding of the historical context of these myths, and an invaluable perspective on the etymology and interconnectedness of the world of Norse mythology with the broader reconstructed Indo-European culture it is derived from. It also offers helpful footnotes that demand highly enjoyable further reading. The reason why I would shy away from saying this was a theology is the early chapter on Voluspa. Now, it is said in the promotional material that the author is a second-generation Germanic pagan, and I wouldn't want to take anything away from him or cast doubt on his sincerely held beliefs, but this book, while fascinating on a number of levels, is not a comprehensive prospectus for adherence to a religion. My primary concern here is in the thorny issue of transcendence. This is brought readily to the fore in the discussion on Ginnunga Gap, one of, if not the main opportunity for a transcendent and explanatory tract for the essence of all being. Rather disappointingly, this is explained in the following terms. The root of the word gin means holy or sacred, and thus the word Ginnunga Gap can be translated as a sacred emptiness, a holy and creative potentiality from which things are given rise. These are not necessarily physical, material things like the earth or waters, for that necessarily comes later, but they are ephemeral and yet nevertheless manifest and incarnate beings, concepts and truths, which includes the Jotnar and the gods, and that which they must necessarily depend upon. It must be noted here that the structure and implication of this Ginnunga Gap preclude the notion of philosophical transcendence within the Nordic conception of cosmology, as the Ginnunga Gap physically exists, insomuch as a bowl can be said to be empty, or we can speak of the existence of zero, as a tangible part of the same world into which all other things are born into and exist. Ymir exists in relation to the two worlds of Niflheim and Muspelheim, as are the gods uncovered in the case of Buri, or born in the case of Bor and the rest. We must therefore reject notions of transcendence, that the gods and the heavens rest outside of reality, and accept that they are instead incarnate within them, in overlapping spheres. End quote. A rudimentary search for the notion of theology or God study goes deeper than this. This book is very much an exploration of Norse or Germanic religion, that is to say, a deep and well-written formulation of the culture around observance, but in rejecting transcendence it offers little in theological terms. If this was, and I know it wasn't, the zenith of the offering of my Norse ancestors in terms of establishing meaning, then I'm not surprised that the Eastern Abrahamic religions were a swaying force. My own view is that the cosmological nothingness yet everythingness of Ginnunga Gap provides a glimpse into that transcendence. The gods were not those of Greek myth, the Zeus and others in Mount Olympus who wandered down to cause chaos and suffering in the world of men, and were part of that world. I think the originators of this mythology hoped and intended more for their gods. Yes, Odin and the others did interact with the mortal realm, but this was not the norm. That observation takes nothing away from the achievement of the author. This is a great piece of work and one I'll be referring to for years to come. I would absolutely recommend it. But that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, share, and most importantly subscribe. And you can also support the channel on Subscribestar via the link in the description or via YouTube Super Thanks. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.